Hey everybody, welcome back to Moments to Myself, the series where we read a chapter of the book and unpack it a little bit more. Last time we talked about chapter 5, which is about ego, and if you haven't seen that video, go check it out because we unpacked a lot of gems and knowledge, and I think it's just really important for you to have in all areas of your life. This time, we're going to go and dive into chapter 6, which is about living in the past. And I'm really excited to get into this because we all do it probably without even knowing that we're doing it. So let's just dive in a little bit deeper. We can't move on and grow if we're still living as the same person we once were. We allow past situations to control present moments by carrying the weight of old narratives. They vary all across the board from I'm unworthy of love, I can't do this, or I can never forgive this person. One of the narratives that I live by was that I was a newly introvert. Around my junior year of college, I became very shy and private, which hindered me from building relationships with my colleagues. Here and there, when I felt comfortable to show up as myself, I would hear my peers express how shocked they were at how sociable I actually was. I attributed it to not being an outgoing person and felt satisfied continuing to live that myth. It wasn't until after I moved to LA that I decided to change. Well, technically I was forced to change. I had no real friends or family there, so unless I was going to fall into the realms of depression, I needed to socialize and make friends. First, I stopped telling people that I was an introvert because I wanted to stop believing it and speaking it into existence. That lie I told myself was simply an excuse to give others so they wouldn't expect me to reveal more of my true self. Then I had to push past the internal boundaries of comfortability that were safe but equally damaging and limiting. I found power in honoring my authentic self in the moment, which I learned doesn't exclusively abide by either label of introvert or extrovert. That exercise helped me realize the power of the mind and tongue. The longer I believed and spoke of a myth I no longer wanted to bear, the longer it would remain true. Even when I spoke of not being a shy and private person with a desire to change, I was still validating an old narrative. All right, let's get into that. So oftentimes our environment shapes who we are because it provokes who we need to be in that season of our life, right? And then when seasons change, we hold on to dear life of who we once were and we show up as that person in this new season of life, right? And take me for example. In high school, I was very outgoing. I was very silly. I was not shy at all, okay? When I got to university, that changed. That went out the window because of my circumstances, because of my environment. It molded me to now show up as a different person because I experienced a lot of situations that made me want to go inward, that made me I just felt really alone. And so I took on this persona of I'm just going to be this introverted person that doesn't show myself. And I'm going to tell people, oh yeah, I'm an introvert, to even give reason as to to just basically lower their expectations. Like, don't expect me to be all rah, rah, rah because I'm an introvert. That's what I do. Meanwhile, when I'm around my friends, I'm like, ha, 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 being silly, being goofy, whatever. And then, when people would see a glimpse of that, they'd be like, hey, I never knew. And it's like, oh yeah, because I was wearing a mask the whole time, whatever. Anyways, like I said in the book, I don't associate myself as either introvert, extrovert, whatever. I show up as who I need to be in that moment. Sometimes that looks like me being an extrovert. Sometimes that looks like me being more inverted. And so I think that it's important to note that oftentimes we tell ourselves that we are something and then we look for our environment or our circumstances to affirm that for us. If we think that we're smart, if we think we're whatever it is, sometimes we go out in the world and we look for confirmation. We look for other people to affirm and validate who we say that we are, right? And sometimes when we've grown, when we've done the work to change into, wiser beings that we are, we sometimes forget to acknowledge the growth that we've done, that we've had to get to where we are today. So if we once were lazy and now we are diligent, we are disciplined, and we are determined. Sometimes we almost have these like maybe traumatic responses to situations of procrastination or something. Sometimes we have these like triggers that could still affect us because we may still think like, oh, like I'm lazy and I'm still fighting off not being labeled as such, when really we've already removed ourselves from that label. Like we've grown past that. Like that's not who we are anymore. We've proved that to ourselves 10 years ago. And sometimes we just forget to acknowledge that, and we still think of ourselves and almost like act out in response to thinking of who we once were. And overall, I think it's just easier to see ourselves as who we once were rather than who we are now. And especially if who we are now has been a result of a traumatic situation. And honestly, I use the example of me being an introvert in my book, but honestly, I have gone through traumatic situations of being in an abusive relationship, and that completely changed my world. I mean, I saw myself as someone who was weak. I saw myself as someone who was insecure. I didn't have confidence in myself. I just saw someone who just was susceptible to a situation that I did not deserve. And if you would have asked me maybe like a few years prior, I would have never labeled myself as like, yep, I'm checking all these boxes. This is who I am. You know, I would have never thought myself as that. But here I was in this situation, and when I accepted that reality, I took on that persona, those characteristics of, wow, like I'm this kind of person that checks all these boxes. And I was afraid that other people would still see me as that same person, you know, but I saw myself as that, and I couldn't shake that off until I did the work to realize like that was a situation that happened in the past. That may have been who I was in that environment, in that circumstance. But of course, I forgot to acknowledge all of the work that had been done over the years to heal from that process. To heal from that situation. And now it's so funny. I was talking to my therapist a while back, and I was telling her that I was anxious about being in rooms with people from my past, and I was just anxious about a situation from my past. And when we talked about it, you know, we came to the revelation of it's actually really beautiful that now you get the opportunity to show up as who you are today. Like you get the opportunity to show up as this Kamri, right? Like if you are encountering something or a situation from your past, then that old Kamri, that's how she handled it then. Now you get an opportunity to handle situations as who you are now. And I think it's such a beautiful thing for me, in my opinion, because it just shows me how much I've grown from my past. And it's like I don't have to put on, I don't have to do anything, I don't have to overthink, I don't have to be anxious about it, I don't have to worry. I can just show up as me, right? And because I'm comfortable with who I am now, and I love who I am now, it's so easy for me to just be like, oh, duh, like I can just show up as me and I can be me and everything will be okay because I trust who I am today and I respect who I am today, right? And a lot of those boxes that I checked off back then, they don't look the same now. Like they've all been unchecked in some regard, right? And so I think that if you have gone through any situation that has been traumatic, or even, it doesn't have to be like life or death, but something that triggers you to this day, it could be relationships, it could be a situation within your family, it could be something happening to a friend, who knows, right? But those circumstances can really shake us and almost identify us, or as we think they identify us, and we almost see ourselves as like as our trauma. And it's like, no, your trauma may have been the catapult to what's allowed you to evolve into who you are today, right? Like, I talk about in my book how rather than seeing ourselves as like, or seeing our traumatic situations as like the bigger point, it's like, no, this traumatic situation was the cause, but the effects of that is what's more relevant. Now I'm me, like I'm who I am today because of that situation. Not to completely give it all of that credit, but it's a part of who I am today, right? And I just hope that a lot of people find grace and forgiveness within themselves of identifying and moving and acting as if they are someone from their past, and not giving themselves the opportunity to show up as who they are today. And even with other people, like other people may change, right? And I think that we shortcut them or ourselves when we don't give other people the opportunity to show up as who they are, because they change too, right? Everything that I'm going through, somebody else, they've gone through life, and whether they've changed for the better or for worse, I think we should still give room for what's relevant in the now, right? Rather than acting off of things that happened in the past. So I hope that you can identify moments in your life where you find yourself operating as who you once were rather than who you are today. I wish all of the best for you all of the healing, all of the love, and all the joy. I pray that it fills your hearts and your spirits. And I will see you guys on the next episodes. Bye.